Yeah, you know we were speaking before.
Come a bit closer, just a tiny bit closer. It's all right. Just
Yeah. All
hear
right.
your voice. You see?
So you know we were speaking before.
Yeah.
About the Mark 7. Mark 7.
Verse 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I was saying to you about the what was it? Oh, that's right. The the Greek.
Yes, and I tried to look. I perhaps didn't look long enough, but I was looking to see if I had any Greek which might lack that. But it seems to me it's generally believed that is St. Mark stating that Jesus declared all foods clean. So he's written the text, he's repeated what Jesus says, and then when it says in brackets, thus, chapter 7 verse 19 of St. Mark's Gospel, thus he declared all foods clean, that is St. Mark himself saying that. That's what I seem to get from looking at the broad understanding of that text. But you go ahead.
Right, because what I did is I you're saying about the majority text.
Can't remember what I said about the majority text.
Oh, no, but I think isn't that what you said that's what your
I think
King James...
the New King James Version. Yes, I looked in the front and that was saying it's reliant on the majority text, I think.
Yeah. Because I managed to find a let me see if I can find it, a PDF, and it's called the Greek New Testament according to the majority text.
Yep.
And it's edited by Zane C. Hodges and Arthur L. Farstad, with assistant editor William C. Duncan.
Right.
And if I go to that same one,
Is this the New King James or the?
No. This is Greek New Testament.
Okay, but the new, I don't. When we get the New King James version, I'm not sure if those guys, because they say the majority text.
Yeah.
But they're all these modern translations don't just take one text anymore, do they?
Right.
They take from other texts which they consider to be more ancient and more faithful by their own methods of biblical study.
Yeah.
So it may be that what you're quoting now, because I think the King James doesn't have that part in brackets, does it?
No.
No. So what would not surprise me is that the text I've got in the New King James Greek Interlinear, which I must hasten to add is a Protestant version, not Catholic one.
Yeah.
They may have it there in their Greek because they've taken a text which isn't just the majority text, but it forms the basis of their Greek text. That's what I'm guessing.
Right. So, but this particular, this is just Greek New Testament. So this is a compilation, not even of any translation. This is a compilation of the Greek.
Yes, but the majority text is one particular branch of documents, isn't it? It's not like, and so there are others, and some will contain the verse that we've been talking about, or the section we've been talking about. Others will not. And I think I'm only assuming now that the New King James Version Greek seems then to be adding to what the Old King James underlying Greek text has.
Yeah. But it just seems more. So you know that. Is that the same Bible you've got there? The one?
No, this is the Revised Standards Catholic edition.
Oh, right.
So it's altered. The Revised Standard is based on, I think, it comes by the Authorised Version, I think, which is via King James.
Yeah.
But as I say, there's certain things that we don't agree with in translation, so we got a Catholic edition. But it's really all in English, so it's not really going to help. But I think that most Protestant Bibles will be almost exactly the same as this.
Right.
Almost exactly the same as this. Because we say, for example, a virgin shall conceive.
Yeah.
Whereas in some, it says a young woman. So there are one or two other things like that.
All right. So in that one you've got there, does that have the brackets?
Let's see. 790. Yes, it does.
Right. So it sounds to me like the brackets are more of a later interpolation rather than something that they got from the old. Because if these guys did the Greek and it's this majority text and it's not in there, and then you've got King James, it's not there, and then there's another Greek a Greek New Testament I found. The two others, and neither of them they don't have the extra text either.
Okay.
And
you know what? At this point, I'd have to really, really get stuck into that to have any chance of saying anything meaningful. Because if I've got a New King James version of the Bible, and they've got that in there, and it's in their Greek text, because I'm able to see that it's there when I look at the Greek. I'm not a Greek. I'm not proficient in Greek by any means, but I can see what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So those scholars have put it there, those Protestant scholars. I can't really say anything other than that's what they've chosen to do. Now you could say, well, perhaps it doesn't belong there and they've made a mistake.
I don't know. I'd say it's put there on purpose. So they've come up with a reasoning for why they put it in there. But what I'm having a hard time with is seeing what their theological reasoning is. Because if I'm finding these Greek New Testaments, and none of them have that extra Greek in there, and I mean, do they ever tell in the preface where they get that Greek from?
Well, think this is a pocketbook version, isn't it?
Right.
So this size doesn't tell you that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've got larger Bibles, of course.
Yeah.
I doubt that they'd say that. That's why I was trying to get this Greek, as much as I could about the Greek, but I didn't do as much looking into it as you did. So I just really can say I've not come up with anything that takes me further. You have, but one thing we ought to know is that, well, no, I shouldn't say we ought to know. My view is those who produce the New King James Version are, like all Protestant scholars, in my view, are very honest and upstanding in the way they produce their Bibles. The only difference I have with them is they don't include 7 Old Testament books, but what they do include, they're extremely right, proper and honest and scholarly in their production.
Yeah.
So I think that I can only go by what I read, and I assume they've decided that the looking at all the ancient texts in Greek that there are, this belongs in there. But whether it does or not, we can't ever be sure because we don't have Mark's original.
Yeah, but it's just I just find it strange though that these because it's 3 Greek New Testaments I found so far, so maybe there's another version I haven't found. But the 3 I found so far, none of them have it. So I just thought that if they were putting it in as such an official thing, they would have agreed with all these guys who put together these Greek New Testaments as well. But it seems like there's a division, like a sharp division, between what they put into these translations and what the people who put together the Greek New Testaments are doing. So it's something.
Is it therefore you've not found any Greek New Testaments which contain verse 19? With that section.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to see what the Greek of the brackets is, and so far I haven't found any. So what I can do is I can go to, like, I've got my Bible which has got the Strongs here.
Yes.
And it shows what the Greek words are in Matthew 19. So if I go to then the Greek New Testament and find 19, I can match each word going down until you get to the end, and then there's nothing extra. And then the next verse obviously carries on with with similar Greek words, because obviously the ordering is slightly different in the proper Greek compared to Strong's, but you can see the same words. And so I'm just looking for like a mystery PDF of the Greek New Testament, which actually has the Greek in that brackets part, and that's
you've reminded me. There's plenty of time over Christmas for me to go searching further. In fact, you remind me. I didn't even look on Logos. I've got Logos Bible Program.
Yeah.
I didn't even think to look on that. If it isn't on my bookshelf, my brain tends to forget what I've got on the computer. So I'll go and have a look at that as well. That's interesting. But to me, even if it were never in St. Mark's Gospel, it wouldn't matter, because we disagree on this. But I think Jesus is plain enough in the words which are in the Bible. And in fact, from the King James, in fact, how far back can one go? I think that as far as back as we can go, we find that people were not worried about what food they ate. the eating of pork. When we go back into the New Testament writings themselves, there's this issue about food. But when you come out of the New Testament times, there seems to be no issue amongst those who call themselves Christians about what you eat. There may be an odd group of what the fathers of the church would call like Judaizing Christians in the early centuries, but the vast majority of Christians seem to have no problem with eating anything. Whatever crawleth upon the ground or flieth in the air, put it on your plate.
Yeah, but I mean that can be explained just from the fact that when Jesus said in Luke 20, I think 22, or Luke 20 something, where he says about how that the Jerusalem would be compassed with armies, and then that the Israelites will go into captivity. So now, if the whole place is destroyed and all the Israelites are in captivity, and all their captors are eating pork, then they're not going to be cooked. When your slave master's got you with a whip, what the king says, no, I don't want that pork, and he just drops the whip on you. So going by the fact that God had broken the covenant completely, it's hardly surprising that now the whatever the heathen want, that now just comes in and takes over, since of course there's no more people with any power to actually enforce anything that God has laid down.
But other aspects of heathen religion remain completely rejected in the church. For example, we Catholics, we have statues.
Yeah.
We have paintings of Jesus and Mary and so on. We have the saints.
Yeah.
But we've had this strict rejection of idolatry. Never stopped. And so, why would if we maintained this rejection of idolatry and always keeping this doctrinal distinction between the veneration of a sacred image, as we call it, and idolatry of images, I'd have thought we would also keep the distinction between foods which are permissible and foods which are impermissible. And the destruction of Israel was really a local catastrophe, predicted, I believe, by the prophet Daniel, and by Jesus, of course, in the 4 Gospels, with 3 of the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels. So the Christian world, which was beginning to form in other parts of the Mediterranean, was untouched by the catastrophe of ancient Israel in between 66 and 73. So they could have carried on distinguishing between foods which are acceptable and foods which are not. But there's no sign in the writings of the fathers of the church that, and I call them fathers, but that's a bit loaded. I could say there's no sign in the writings of early Christians that you need to distinguish between foods.
But you know what you're saying about how even though the destruction happened in Israel, but they were
just slightly to the side. That's all right, mate.
But
I'm the one who spots it. Other people aren't going to know. It's all right.
No lights.
I know. I'm going to switch you on soon, actually. Go on.
you know about the rest of Europe being unaffected, but remember how when James gave the declaration.
Let me switch on.
Yeah.
It's right. It reminds me. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah. So you had James giving this declaration in Acts 15 and 19. And it says, so far back.
It's 15.
No, it's just your New Testament is very thin, isn't it?
What's that?
It's very thin.
The Bible.
No, your New Testament.
Oh, yeah. Well, they pack it all in very well. I mean, this is why I like this Bible.
Yeah.
You can actually get in my pockets.
So Acts 15:19 says, "Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which are among the Gentiles are turned to God, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood. For Moses of old time hath in every city them that preaching, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day. So even though Jesus obviously resurrected and gone back to heaven, James is still saying that the way that they're going to get their knowledge about sin is from when Moses is read in synagogues. But it seems that once the Israel was or Jerusalem was destroyed, even this concept of Moses being read in every city, on the Sabbath day, that went with it. So it's as if the destruction did spread to other places as well. Because James is expecting that this is something the Gentiles can do, but obviously they can't do that now.
Well, actually, Moses, in the Catholic Church, we have reading at Mass from the Old Testament and readings from the New Testament. So it isn't that Moses is read every Sunday or every day at Mass, but the Old Testament is read every Sunday.
Yeah.
And the Mass goes back, way back. We have it in our present form broadly back to the time of Pope St. Damasus I, because you get there in the 4th century after Constantine, when there's enough peace in the church for documents to start getting written in large numbers and in detail to see what the actual historical behaviour of Christians was in terms of their worship. However, go back before Damasus, go back before Constantine, though the data are more scanty, we can still say that there's no reason to believe, along with the Gospels being read, there's no reason to believe also that Old Testament readings weren't taking place.
Yeah.
And I'd have thought in Christian communities Moses was being written as well. I don't think the destruction of Israel by the Romans prevented that.
Right.
And so, and the abstaining is in reference, as far as food goes, from what is strangled and from blood. That therefore is really narrowing down the impermissible range of foods.
No, it's just strangled and blood from cows and sheep and chickens. That's what it means.
Okay, but you see, so obviously the vast majority of Israel's food laws are not even being made a requirement for the believers here, are they?
No, but they're in Jerusalem, remember?
Yeah.
So they weren't giving up that stuff up by then.
No, well, I don't know what they're giving up. I mean, what we've got here is this is for the Gentiles, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the Gentiles are being told, in terms of food, they just restrain from blood and the meat of strangled animals. And they're not being told they must obey the food laws. So Gentiles seem to have a very limited amount of abstention from foods.
Yeah, but then he wouldn't have mentioned the part about Moses then, because there would be no need.
Well, actually, yes, Moses has been read from early generations in every city. For he's read every Sabbath in the synagogues. But then that could also refer to idol worship, to refrain from the pollution of idols.
Yeah, but the problem there is that when Moses read in synagogues, they would read the dietary laws and the Ten Commandments and things like that. So if he didn't want the Gentiles to acknowledge those parts, he would have told them, but don't listen to this part whenever they read it in the synagogue. But when you read that, it's as if he's saying, go and listen to whatever they say in a synagogue and just take it to heart.
If he wanted the Gentiles to continue the food laws, I think it would be very misleading, accidentally or otherwise, but misleading to say to the Gentiles, refrain from the meat of strangled animals and from blood, because he's taken the topic of food and he's focused on that, whereas really he should have either said maintain the food laws in toto or not refer to them at all. But by referring to one aspect, the meat of strangled animals and blood, he's given the Gentiles the impression that as far as food goes, strangled animals and blood are the only things they have to refrain from. It's quite misleading if you're a Gentile and you're receiving this instruction.
Yeah, but then you still have the problem of if they go into a synagogue, you know what they're going to get. They're not going to get.
the Gentiles wouldn't be going to the synagogues, though, would they?
Yeah, but that's what James is saying.
This is talking about Jews, isn't it? Because it's saying, for from early generations, Moses has had in every city those who preach him, for he is read every Sabbath in the synagogues. So this is the Jews, the Jewish diaspora. Whereas really, it's not pertaining to the Gentiles who will be in their places of worship now.
Yeah, but then that would be changing the subject though. So it wouldn't make sense for him to say that in terms, because they're talking about Gentiles here, not Jews. So the whole subject is about Gentiles.
Well, when he says that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, we should write to them, and he then gives certain instructions to them.
Yeah.
They're very limited. And it's basically suggesting these limited instructions are taken from Moses. They're not just plucked out of the air. So that to me means he's saying, yes, they should abstain from certain things, but those things are limited, and we shouldn't trouble them in general. And that statement, we shouldn't trouble the Gentiles, is like saying we should not impose upon them the Jewish law. And the law includes all kinds of rituals, but all kinds of food regulations as well.
Right, but so then, when Paul comes up with these list of things, so he mentions things like fornication and uncleanness. So if we go by what you said there about it's only those 4 things, then wouldn't that then be a conflict with what Paul's saying?
I think what James is doing when he's writing to them about what things that really pertain to the old law they've got to focus on. But being Christians, they've got the new law from Jesus, which embraces all the moral teachings and intensifies them. And so they've got to obey the law that Jesus has given out of his own mouth. But there are these specific things that they seem to be bothered about, which interface with the Jewish law, specifically ritual practices of the Jews. And that's why he's mentioning, in terms of ritual practices of the Jews, in terms of food, it's just refrain from strangled animals and from blood, and the pollution of idols, because that's another thing, isn't it? Jesus doesn't speak directly in the New Testament, correct me if I'm wrong, about idolatry so much. It's just taken for granted. You don't worship idols. I mean, honestly, why would he even have to say that? So, but people who are Gentiles living amongst idol worshippers, who have friends and family living amongst idol worshippers, should they go to ceremonies with them? It's like today you might say if you're a Christian, if you're a Catholic, should you go to the wedding of a Catholic who is divorced from his Catholic wife in his Catholic marriage, and he's now marrying again? Should you go to the wedding of your friend? Well, I'd say the answer is no. But the point is, it's a question that would be there for a Catholic. So a Gentile would have a question in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century about his friends and family who are pagan worshippers. They've got idols maybe even in the house. What do we do? So these kinds of questions are to help them. So that's that one. That's pollutions of idols. And unchastity. Why he bothers mentioning unchastity, I don't know, because that is really just part of the ordinary moral law which Jesus has been plain about. But I guess it's because, contrary to today's modern liberal Christians, sexual sins are some of the worst. And we know St. Paul says what is done in the body is very, very bad because it's in the body. And I think that's why he actually brings in unchastity, even though it is part of the general moral law, and Jesus' own hammering away at that issue in his ministry.
So you're saying about how you in the Catholic Church you read the Old Testament.
Yes.
I wonder if you'd ever read this one in the church, and it's Numbers 33 and 51.
Okay. 33:51, right?
It says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all their pictures, and destroy all their molten images, and quite pluck down all their high places. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land, and dwell therein, for I have given ye the land to possess." So if God had ever sent the children of Israel up across the Mediterranean to Rome and gave them orders, what do you think would have happened? And say the Catholics were in session and they were doing their stuff, and then the children of Israel arrived on the coast.
Yeah.
What do you think would have happened if going according to what we read there?
Well, if God himself had sent the children of Israel against the Catholic Church, then I'd be in a pickle. That's a fact.
No, but
you see, it would be impossible for me to envision such a scenario. It'd be like, what's that? A house divided against itself cannot stand, Jesus said in another context.
Well,
what I'd have to say is this: if though the Catholic Church is just another organisation which fancies itself to be the true church, and God sends a true church, at this point Israel, against it, then of course Israel's going to prevail and destroy the Catholic Church and all our sacred images. If, excuse me, my friend, thanks very much. Then you're going to get all our stuff destroyed, our altars, our images, our churches, our sacraments, everything. But I'm here, and it's predicated upon the Catholic Church being the new Israel.
Right.
Because does not Jesus say, what you possess will be taken from you and given to another? So those who don't like what they call it, replacement theology.
Yeah.
It's very, very popular to go against replacement theology, the suggestion that Israel has been replaced. But Jesus is plain. Israel has been replaced. He says it. It's going to be what you've got is going to be taken from you and given to another. And the parable of the vineyard, where the son eventually comes and is killed, and the king just dispossesses those people of the vineyard. He hands it to another. So there's no old Israel anymore. Israel is gone. Old Israel is finished until, as St. Paul says, they'll be grafted back in. But in the meantime, that doesn't mean there'll be old Israel restored. There'll be old Israel reunited with new Israel. And I'll say my position is new Israel is the Catholic Church. So we will have, at the end times, the reunification of of Jerusalem and Rome. And that will be a key event in end times events. But I think you weren't talking about that. I just took it further. You were talking about the images, right?
Yeah. So. Because
I was talking about images before, and I thought you might latch onto that.
Yeah. Well, it's just like what you just said there about being reunited.
Yeah.
So, but then we'd have a bit of a problem there because they get reunited with the Catholic Church, and then one of the Israelites will say, "Hey, give me that Bible," and then they read it. They get to Numbers 33, flick through it, and say, "Oh wait, look, this is what God said we should do before." So then they ask the classic questions: "Well, what has changed?"
Okay, here's what's changed. In fact, the Bible says it, and I can flick through with my cold hands if necessary. It is not images per se that are rejected by God. It is kinds of images. The Lord God himself instructs the creation of 2 golden angels to be put atop the Ark of the Covenant. God himself instructs the creation of bulls to support the great big sea, it's called, isn't it? In the temple.
The bowl.
God himself, the great bowl.
Yeah.
God himself has images of animals made around the temple walls, if I'm right. God himself, of all things God does, you'd never do this, and I'd never do this, but God does it, instructs a big brass serpent to be created for people to look upon, to be cured by, which is later destroyed because of the fear of idolatry, right? But God would have known that, and yet he instructs it. So here's the Catholic position. Yes, there's a risk of idolatry when you have any image at all. But look at the Muslims. They have the black cube. There's ways of being an idolater. If you don't have an image of a person or an angel or God, you could then idolize an abstraction, an abstract object. Say a cube. I know it's actually a real object, but you can find things to idolize if you really are. If you're in the wrong spirit. So getting rid of images itself is not the solution to ending idolatry, but the presence of images can be a way into idolatry. But the fact that God ordered the construction of images himself, while having condemned graven images in the Ten Commandments, shows that God has got a distinction between good images and bad images.
Right.
And we have to ask ourselves, is it proper to have any sort of image at all? Or is it wrong always? Well, it can't in principle be wrong always, but that doesn't mean we Catholics are right.
Right.
We have to look at the question to find out whether we Catholics are right. And I would say that we're right because 2,000 years of Catholicism has never led to the Catholic Church saying, right, we've got some kind of totem pole type deity or some Moloch type deity, which we believe is really a god. I've got statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary, our Lord Jesus Christ, Saint Martin de Porres, Saint Anthony. I've got crucifixes aplenty. And you know, if I was to think all of these are Jesus or all of these are Mary, I'd be a nutcase. In fact, never in my life, even as a little boy, a little baby, never did I think that this image of plaster or wood and paint is actually a god or a goddess, or somehow there's something in there. But I could still talk to that image. Get this. Now, I know some Protestants will go freak out if I say that. Imagine this. I had a dog. I'm a big dog fan.
Yeah.
I've got photographs of my dog. If I put one in a frame, I might talk to that image, you know, because I'm just a bit soft in the head. Talk to my dog, because I don't know where my dog is. I believe my dog will be in heaven with me in the end. Now, does that make me an idolater? Does that make me think that picture is really my dog when I look at it and talk to him? Not that I've got a picture up there of my dog, I haven't, but I could do it. But he wouldn't mean, obviously I'm not stupid in thinking this is really my dog, this picture. Just as if a picture of Christ I look at, or Mary, and I might pray towards them. It doesn't mean for a minute I think that's really Jesus or Mary. In fact, in a house fire, say my house is burning down, I'm getting myself out of there, and all my statues and pictures can burn, even if they're blessed by a priest, because they're things. So you see, I'm saying this because Protestants often think we are actually seeing Mary and Jesus in these things. You'll soon see our Catholic things to be a statue. Even with these processions in Latin America, the statue's taken along and there's flowers on the statue and all this. You see pretty quick what a Catholic really thinks of the statue. If there was an earthquake or a fire raging through or some wild animals came, they'd drop that and they'd run because they know it's just an object. We're not like pagans. Now, there are pagans, obviously in the past, pagans really did think their statues and the images were the god. They really did.
Yeah.
And today, in parts of the world, parts of the undeveloped world, I'm sure people do believe that sort of thing. But we're talking about the Catholic Church, which begins 2,000 years ago in ancient Israel. In my view, it's the Israelite religion, the religion of the Jews. It expands into the Roman Empire and all the other pagan territories. Wherever it goes, it's smashing idols. Saint Benedict, Saint Patrick, they're smashing idols.
Yeah.
And yet we're the same religion that has our own images. So we see the distinction. The distinction. And I've got quotes from the early Christians about how we see images.
Yeah, but this, what you're saying about the images, you said that God had them to create some.
Yeah.
So obviously he had them create them for like a specific purpose. But the one good thing about those images is that none of them conflicted with the truth, because so they were just images of something. They just represented something.
Yeah.
But would there be a problem if the image did conflict with the truth?
Sorry.
Would there be a problem if the image did conflict with the truth?
Yes, because no image, no writing, nothing in Catholic practice should ever conflict with the truth.
Right. So I was watching this video of this guy called Sneaker's Corner. He was recording. He had some videos of these Catholics who were talking about that infiltration of the Catholic Church, and there was this one guy who was talking, and he had a image of beside him as he was talking about infiltrators. He had an image of it was Mary holding baby Jesus.
But go on.
Yeah, but then she was wearing like a royal garment, and she had a crown on.
Yeah.
And then she was holding baby Jesus, and he had a crown as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what truth is that showing?
Okay. The truth it's showing is that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Yeah.
She is the Queen Mother. As in the Davidic kingdom, Bathsheba was the queen mother when Solomon ascended the throne. And you could go to, instead of going directly to Solomon, you could go to the queen mother to get her to persuade Solomon to do what you want. So you could go to the queen mother, as in the wedding of Canaan, to get her to get Jesus to do what you want. So this is a reflection of ancient Israel, because the Davidic kingdom is a reflection of the new kingdom of Christ, which Christ made clear as a reflection of it, because he, like there's 12 patriarchs for ancient Israel, there's 12 apostles for the new Israel, just as there was the chief steward, the prime minister of the Davidic kingdom who received the keys. Just so Peter, the chief steward, the prime minister of the new Israelite kingdom, the Catholic Church, receives the keys. So there's all this reflection. So yes, she is queen mother.
Yeah,
of heaven, because that's where she is.
Yeah, but that actual, the way they have it, her holding him, that's incorrect, because when he received the crown, it's after he died and resurrected and went back to heaven.
Okay. Now,
so that image is, the way the image is done is incorrect, and that's not true the way that they.
Okay, I see. You're looking at it from the historical sequence that he was. Yeah.
Yes. So that image doesn't actually represent anything true if you actually look at the way the image looks.
Okay. Now, the images in Revelation as well, because there are those who look at the book of Revelation, see a repetition of events, and you have events which are not historically set out all the time.
Yeah.
They're set out in different ways. So, for example, the one whom we regard as most obviously the Blessed Virgin Mary, in chapter 12, verse 1 of the book of Revelation, she has a crown on her head, a crown of 12 stars. So there we start the crown imagery, biblically. But she's about to give birth to a child. The child is Jesus. But there's a dragon waiting to devour the child. And after that you get this reference to a war in heaven between Michael and the angels, right? But the war in heaven between Michael and the angels took place before the human race began. Well, according to mainstream Christianity. But it certainly wasn't occurring at the time of the birth of Jesus, or after the birth of Jesus.
Yeah, but
Lucifer was cast down before all that happened. He's cast down, and subsequently he tempts man.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, even what you're describing there, the imagery is done in a sensible way, because you have the war, and you have the woman with the 12 stars, and she gives birth. So it doesn't say that then she gives birth, and then the child is taken up to heaven. Then he's given her a crown. She's given her a crown, and then she's holding him. So that's not mentioned.
So no, this is difficult because she's got the crown while she's pregnant in Revelation. So she could say the pictures you talked about where she's wearing a crown and Jesus is wearing a crown, she should wear the crown because she's got it in Revelation 12:1 anyway while she's pregnant. So when she's born the child, she's still got that crown. He's got the crown because he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So there's no reason why according to Revelation 12 verse 1 onwards, she shouldn't have a crown when she's holding the baby.
No, but he only gets that after he's fulfilled the mission of dying and resurrecting.
Oh, well, first thing, it seems clear she's entitled to have the crown when she's holding him in that statue, because she has the crown in the Bible when she's pregnant. So she'd have the crown when she's born the child, and he's holding him. Then if you say he only gets the crown when he's fulfilled his mission, it's still proper to artistically put the crown on him to represent the fact that from before he was even conceived from the womb of the Virgin Mary, he was the King of Kings. Because he actually was, he's God himself, from before all ages.
Yeah, but you know, the way that God does things is that when he depicts something, it's according to what as the proper due. So he will only get the crown properly once he's finished the mission. So the way he is, because even when you look at, like you got in Daniel 10, when Daniel sees the messenger, and he says that he's got the face like lightning. Even in there, it doesn't say he's wearing a crown. So even when you see visions similar to him in the Old Testament, the crown's not there. And it's only once, in Daniel 7, it's when he says that he comes before the Ancient of Days, that's when he gets the kingdom. So that's when he would have the right to the crown at that point, because that's when he's given it.
You often see in representations of Jesus in the lap of the Virgin Mary, a boy who's, he's not like an ordinary child. He doesn't look like an ordinary baby. He's holding a scepter. He's holding an orb. These are the symbols in Western kingship of royal authority. But obviously Jesus never held a scepter and an orb in his little life as a little boy. This is just art. I wouldn't drive it too far. It's trying to say this little baby is God incarnate. He's the king of the universe. That's what they're trying to say, amongst other things, no doubt. And if you want to say, well, they shouldn't do that because of what you've said, I'm not going to object to your reasoning. I'm just saying that with art, there is a certain flexibility that's allowed. And if somebody actually does something which you don't think is artistically proper, and most people have issues with an artist's efforts in various ways, I don't think one can say that therefore means the art is in definite contradiction with true doctrine. It's just an artistic...
Yeah, but it doesn't display the true doctrine, that's the problem. So someone could see it and say, oh, she's holding Jesus and he's got a crown, and they can actually think the wrong sequence because they haven't read the Bible.
Well, we would say that this shows he is the king of the universe. He's God himself. He's not just a boy, not just a baby. He's holding the orb and the scepter, though he never held physically an orb and a scepter. But that shows he's a true king. The orb representing the possession of the world, and the scepter being that royal authority to control people and the universe. So that image, these images tell stories. They're not actually necessarily showing what you are trying to say they should show. So if the artist has a different purpose than you've got, then you can't say he's wrong in his purpose if it's trying to show something different from what you think it should be showing. I don't think I can say much more, because if you want to challenge an artist's artistry, fair enough, but you'll be there till the cows come home, because there's so many different ways to apply artistic skills to get a message across, and there's so many different kinds of messages you can get across with your art. I mean, if you're saying it's objectionable in principle to show Jesus as a boy with a crown on his head, I can't challenge on that, because I can only say what I've said. It's just the artist. If an artist wants to tell you something about Jesus, then it might not be that it's in a kind of historical sequence, or it's like, as you say, he gets the crown later and he's given it in too soon. But if the artist is trying to say, not that when he gets the crown, but that he actually has that God status and king status from the moment he's a conceptus in Mary's womb, if that's his purpose, then he's fulfilled his purpose, and he hasn't contradicted true doctrine. He's just contradicted the particular thing that you think needs to be pointed out. But different things can be pointed out by art.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I suppose that can be an ambiguous one. But there's another one which I actually spoke to an Eastern Orthodox sort of believer, because it was more specific to them, because they have those pictures of Jesus that they kiss.
Yes.
Now here's the classic question: those, the images, some of the images of Jesus that you have in the churches,
yes,
and some of the statues.
Yes.
Do any of those images depict him after he's resurrected? Sorry, after he's gone back to heaven?
We have images of Jesus in the Ascension. So in my local church, we have Jesus ascending to heaven.
Yeah, but
Ascension Day. The glorified Jesus in heaven.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that we say that because you get pictures of Christ Pantocrator.
Yeah.
Christ, Lord of the universe. And that is the resurrected Jesus. You could say that's a Jesus in heaven in a sense, but we don't ever say we can really represent Jesus in heaven, because we're talking about something that is beyond normal means of representation.
Yeah.
But we nonetheless believe that God allows us a certain religious license within our limits to artistically represent the glorified Lord. So, Henrik,
one point here with the crown, yes, because we are talking about the crown of Jesus. He was crowned with the thorns while he was before Pontius Pilate. And after his resurrection, all the wounds were visible, so probably the same, the bits that were, with the crown that wounded, the thorns that wounded him all the way through, that would be still preserved, I should say. So that would be his crown, but glorious crown this time.
Right.
That's another possibility.
So you're saying about how we don't know how sort of Jesus might look in his glorified form,
except in the Book of Revelation, where we're given a view of him. However, there's more than one representation of Jesus in the Book of Revelation. So again, I would say ultimately, these images in the Book of Revelation are for us here below, who cannot conceive in our earthly bodies, in our earthly lives, what the appearances of people and things are in heaven.
Right, but here's the thing. So why is it that the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics and even the the Adventists and the Mormons, they always like to use they don't seem to like to use that description of him in Revelation. So it's as if there's, and they'll even show, like the Adventists, they'll show him coming on a horse, and you look the same as he does on earth with the brown hair, and then I read in what's in Revelation, and when he's on the horse, he doesn't look like that. So they're actually purposely using the wrong image.
It might be that they're some of the images are jarring in Revelation.
Yeah, but
and
they
might not want to put them like that because they think nobody would have put the image on. That's a bit kind of like mundane as an explanation. But what's your thoughts?
No, I'm saying if you're going to...
Which one are you referring to, by the way? Not the one of the multiple eyes.
No, because that's...
The lamp with the many eyes.
No, because you see, this is what... when you think about it, this is the first thing that John saw without it being a vision. So he was on the island. Then he sees the vision, and then he says he sees one like the Son of Man. But then when you read it, it says,
which chapter are you on?
No, it's just Revelation 1 and 12, and it says, "And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice was as the sound of many waters." So notice, he sees this when he's actually there in the spirit, on the island. But then if you go to where is it? So and then obviously when he comes there, he then gives him the message to the 3 churches. And then when you go, where is it? Yeah, and then you see, but so when you go to the beginning of chapter 4, it says, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as if it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter." So this is where the vision starts. So what he's seeing there on the island, that's the true representation.
Okay.
Because the vision hasn't started yet.
Okay, I take your point, but I think that I can't be, as I see it, as dogmatic as that to say that's not a vision still, because after all, it does say in chapter 1 again, verse 16, in his right hand he held 7 stars, from his mouth issued a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. These to me are really vivid images.
Yeah.
Swords don't come out of people's mouths, you don't hold stars, and you don't have a face shining like the sun.
Yeah, but he's not a person. He's not human anyway.
Well, now this is the thing. In his resurrection body, he appeared to Thomas and the others in the normal way, such that Thomas putting his fingers in the wounds. They were still flesh.
Yeah.
And so he knew this was the same person whom he'd seen die and whom he'd been with for 3.5 years. So if this character had appeared to Thomas would have said, well, this is fabulous, but you're not the one I knew years ago. The one I knew for years and the one who was on the cross.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sure, but so Jesus gave his body continuity after the resurrection for the sake of Thomas and the others. Then you get to this stage and you've got Jesus giving his appearance a different complexion for a different purpose. He wants to show aspects of the majesty of him as God the Son.
Right.
And so we see this. You see it elsewhere, I think it's Isaiah, is it 6? Or Isaiah 1, where you've got the God on the throne, and he's got all this majestic imagery given. But it doesn't mean that when we die, if we go to heaven, we will encounter God like we see him described in this book. Because we will see with eyes that are somewhat improved then, and minds that are somewhat improved, to say the least.
Right, but if you go to like Revelation 19 and 11, so this describes the sort of the battle at Armageddon, and it says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. So notice he's still got the eyes as a flame of fire. So that's implying that's the same one that he saw at the beginning of the vision.
Here he's seeing the face. He's seeing the face here because he said the eyes are like flame of fire.
Yeah.
That means he can see the face with flaming eyes in it. So now we can see not the whole face like the blazing sun. The eyes now are piercing in that way. And again, I think it is another image differently put. I don't want to say that this is kind of just. I'm not saying this is John's imagination, by the way. This is God, this Holy Spirit, inspiring John to see these images. So they're very, very important in every aspect of what they say. So when he says eyes being flames of fire, that's important. It's got significance. The other point about the sword coming out of the mouth and so on, these are very important. They're not just like images like an artist would create. They've got spiritual significance. I just don't see that they're necessarily how we will see Jesus when we die and go to heaven.
Well, if you continue that same one, it says, so 14 says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And just to save time, if you go down to 19, it says, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat upon the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. And the remnant was slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with his flesh. So it says there that they were killed by the sword which proceeded out of his mouth. So if that was just imaginary, then that means this last verse would be incorrect, and that means they died a different way.
If a sword did come out of his mouth and that killed them all, then that's possible, because God can do anything. But come on.
Yeah, no, I'm saying no, not possible. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because if something different happened, then that means God's word would be invalidated. He'd have given us the wrong information.
I see it that your position may be true, but as I say, I'm not dogmatic about it. We Catholics are dogmatic about many things.
Yeah.
So I'm limiting my dogmatism today.
Right.
And I'm going to say that this may be an image of the enemies of Christ being killed in the Battle of Armageddon.
Yeah.
But how they're going to be killed is another matter. For example, by merely being there, all these people who are against Christ will suffer massive heart attacks and drop dead.
Oh.
The sword came out of Christ's mouth metaphorically. He simply commanded, being the Lord of life, the author of life, as St. Peter describes him in the Acts of the Apostles. The author of life took life away. Just like that. But the reference to the sword coming out of his mouth, that could be the command to die. The command to die is like a sword when it's coming out of the mouth of God, not us. But from the author of life, the command to die is effectively like a sword. That's an interpretation which I do not hold to dogmatically, but is just one amongst no doubt many others.
Right, but
This instance here brings the word sword of the mouth, yes? Is it sword of the mouth? But there is also a reference of the breath of the mouth.
yes, Isaiah 9,
yeah.
I think.
Is it Isaiah then?
Yeah, 9.
Ah, you see. So the breath is not so much imagery there, but it's more truth to it, because the word of God is something that either condemns us or actually puts us in right with God. So the word of God has the breath which makes the job.
But I suppose so what I'm just saying though is that what we read there, it gives you a description, even explains like the practical use of something which is an imagery. So then if you have the Eastern Orthodox and Catholics then come with their own images, but they do it differently from what's in the Bible, then that's a conflict though, isn't it?
I actually think that an artist can seek the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to inspire him to create great religious art. I think that's the testimony of Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy and Oriental Orthodoxy down the centuries. I don't think it's contrary to the Bible to be creative. I don't think you have to be using only images that are described in the Bible. I think you're free to use your imagination as a human being to create art. And the very act of creativity is one which means something new will arise. And new means not in here. Something that kind of goes against what's in here is another matter. Say, for example, say you created an image of Jesus with a pointy tail and horns. This is a blasphemy, of course, but it's a subversive of the images of Jesus in here. I'm not saying you could do anything. You're not got like this 360-degree right to be creative in sacred art. But you can create to the point where you are not contradicting or being subversive of the images in here. We Catholics have a real issue here. I think there is subversion in Catholic art. Since the 1960s, we've had art, so-called religious art, which is being favoured by some Catholics, which I think is subversive of the cross, subversive of the image of Jesus, subversive of our faith, and not just art but architecture, subversive architecture of our churches. I know this will be unknown to you, but it is a real... So what you're saying, even though you weren't talking about this, is a very important issue for us. Subversion within art.
Well, you're not talking about those gargoyles, are you?
No, not gargoyles. Gargoyles are fine because gargoyles are not actually... They're not like Christian animals. They're the little demonic creatures, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which in the medieval mind, the creative medieval mind, populated the invisible world.
Right.
Yet they made them into stone so you could see what's in the invisible realm. That's their creative imagination, but it's not subversive. Okay. It's playful. Right. I don't mind playfulness, but when you get certain kinds of images, like the one I suggested as a possibility, putting Jesus as nobody's done that. I'm not saying that kind of thing's happened. But it is very important to say art cannot be, that phrase, cannot have art for art's sake. In the West, the idea is, yes, art for art's sake. It's just fine. But for Catholics, art must be at the service of God and at the service of man's ultimate objective. So it can't be subversive of the true faith. You don't necessarily censor people. You might, but you don't necessarily. But you identify bad art in that sense. And one of the things that I think is good when we've had creativity in art, it's not subversive, it's not contradicting the faith, it's not blasphemous, and it's made the West this great civilization until recent post-war times when it's just degenerated. There we are. How are you, my friend? Yeah, I've seen you hanging around. I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything. No, you just listen. All right.
But anyway, I was going to go to walk and try and warm up a bit. So if you're still here, I might.
All right, I might be popping off because the temperature's going down.
Yeah.
I don't know whether anybody's got any questions or anything before I depart.